So moved.
You good? You second? Okay. Just everybody bring your speakers down. Okay, are there any discussions about the present agenda? All right, all those in favor of approving the present agenda, say aye. I'm just going to go around the room.
Aye.
Mr. Peters? Mrs. Palmer? Mr. Charsky? Mrs. Urista? Mr. Grandinetti? Mr. Hersey?
Aye.
Mr. Heiser?
Aye.
Could you say that again, Mike?
Aye.
Thank you. I turned the speaker down. Okay, and my vote is aye. So motion passes. All right, so this evening is a workshop. We're going to talk about the challenges of opening school and what things the administration has done or thinking about doing to try to fix some of the shortfalls. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Chevier.
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. Appreciate it. I'm happy tonight to talk to the board and members of our community about some of the challenges that we've faced since reopening school. And I know for the board and any members of our public that have been following along, you're going to hear some of the same things this evening. You're gonna hear a little bit more about some of the challenges we've faced since the start of school. Since our last meeting, we've had the opportunity to survey our community, so we're going to spend a little time looking at some of that survey data because I think it gives the board, I know it gives myself and my team the opportunity to kind of dig into, some of that feedback and really kind of take a look at how everybody is feeling. And I'm going to, before I even jump into this presentation, I'm going to start again by saying that, we recognize that school will never be as good as it was until we are back in school 5 days a week, full time for everybody. That's a given. We do know that we are still working under restrictions. There are certain things still that we cannot do. Our reopening plan is still, in full effect. And we continue to deal with regular changes that continue to come our way from New York State. So I'm sure you've probably all seen that the travel quarantine was changed recently. And that has, that ripples down into any organization, even schools, about how we manage. And I will tell you before I jump into slide number one, we have the holiday season upon us, and we know people are going to travel. We know people will probably travel here.
Can I
visit with folks from states that might be,
Excuse me one moment. I'm getting some little reverb. I don't know if you can turn off the speakers, or is that a problem?
Mike, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm getting feedback with Jason talking, some echoing. I don't know if it's the speakers. If it's something I have to put up with, that's fine. Can they be turned off or turned down?
Maybe your microphone? Can you lower the microphone maybe? Is it that again?
I think, Mike? Mr. Tuttle, you probably have to mute because it's echoing from Jason to your computer.
Got it. Thanks.
Is that better? Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to start all over again. No, but we recognize, going back to the travel ban changes, we recognize it's holiday season. We're going to have students and faculty and staff potentially that travel. How does that impact the school environment? We had a 14-day quarantine that was in effect, and now we are looking at, testing before you go, coming back. waiting 3 days. On the 4th day, you test. But we talked a little bit at our last meeting about some of our staffing challenges. And so, you know, how in an organization where you need your people to conduct business and, you know, on a daily basis, there are real worries and challenges with that. And so the 14-day quarantine ban on travel, you know, certainly is helpful. We're not waiting a full 2 weeks now before someone potentially can return. But we do have to recognize that, you know, there is inherently some risk with holiday season and travel and what that means for schools. Knock on wood, we've been very lucky so far. If you follow along on the dashboard, and I know we've talked about that at board meetings, but you can go onto the dashboard and take a look. Knock on wood, we have had 0 student positive cases, 0 staff or faculty positive cases. The only 2 positive cases have come from the SR3 programming, 2 teachers at our district office building. Those have been the only two positive cases. So, you know, those continue to be challenging for us, and you know the information changes on a regular basis. So, as outlined in our plan, our reopening plan, we did specify in our plan that reopening schools is not a one-time event. It should be ongoing. Once we get our feet in the door, we start to gather feedback. We know what we can do well. We know what we can handle, and then we start to look at increased opportunities. Where are areas that we can seek to improve and look to provide enhanced opportunities for our students, and what do we have the capacity to be able to do? So, as mentioned, we sent out a survey. That survey went out. We did survey the entire community, and we asked for feedback on all of our instructional models. I am not going to give you an overview of all of those instructional models tonight. I did send to the board the full survey so that you could go through and look at all the responses. For the public, I believe we might have finished the narrative responses. We go through and just redact names out of there before we post it, but that'll likely be up on our website for the public to review, so they can go through that data and take a look and see how the community responded. But we are going to talk about some of the data. So it's outstanding. We had 743 responses to the survey, which is outstanding. It's great participation, really gives us a broad perspective on our reopening and gives us some solid feedback. And you can see over in the right-hand side of the screen the different groups and the number of participants that we had for each group. So our largest obviously is parents. Our second largest was our student body. We had 146 students, and all of those students that participated, we didn't have any elementary students. They were all secondary students that participated in the survey. So you can see this, the next slide. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but it does give you an indication of the parent responses, the model that their child participates in, just to kind of give you a broad overview of those that participated, what model of instruction their children are participating in. For faculty and staff, you can see we had about 100 responses. About 60% of those were teachers and 40% were staff members. And you can see it was about just about an even split between the 2 buildings, with the district office building and transportation, obviously, where we have the fewest people working, the fewest number of responses. What I think is important to note is we asked, how supported do you feel by your school? And when you take a look at how the students responded, this is where we start to gather some, what I, like to think is pretty useful data. So we've got, it's always great to look on the high end, right? We want to see that blue piece of the pie very supported. We want to see that be as large as it can be. We had 23 students respond positively that way. But when you look at those that feel very supported and supported, we're looking at approximately 100 students that have responded that way. But what becomes a little more concerning is the other half of the there, where we have some students that are feeling somewhat supported or not at all supported, and very few weren't quite sure maybe what that question meant. So it's great that folks are feeling support, but we want to dig into that a little bit deeper, and we want to find out how we can better support our students at school. We have to recognize this, it's a new model and a new way of learning for our students, so we want to provide as much support to them as possible. This slide, when we asked parents the same question, you can see the responses where we had, approximately about 2/3 of our parents that replied it's encouraging, that they felt very supported or supported by their school. Makes me feel really good that quite a few of the folks that took the survey do feel that there's a lot of support coming from the school. I know teachers have been working tremendously hard. The leadership team has been working hard. We know the board has worked hard on all of this, so it's very positive to hear. But again, it's not about getting the great feedback. It's looking on the opposite side of that pie chart and taking a look and recognizing that, approximately 120 people, parents that responded to this survey either feel somewhat supported or not supported at all. And more troubling are 15 responses that indicate they don't feel that they're at all supported. So, that's our goal. And for the public that is listening tonight, we certainly encourage folks to keep that line of communication open. If there's anything you need, we certainly encourage you to contact your building principal, whether you're remote, optional remote, a hybrid student or in person. Please, we encourage emails and phone calls. We want to hear from you. And if we can support you more, we will certainly do that. Faculty and staff support. How supported do you feel by your school? Again, 100 responses. And again, this was cut into about thirds. So, 2/3 really feel very supported or supported, while another feels somewhat supported, and very few felt not at all supported. So, again, internally, we are continuing to work with our faculty and staff to seek ways in which we can better support those who feel they might need additional support from the district. I found this slide, interesting when we talk about mental health and how kids are feeling. And we asked 146 of our students who responded to this survey, and you can see that, about 30% of our students have responded that, sometimes, once in a while, or almost never, they're feeling happy. There's a great deal that do feel 70 have responded that they are happy frequently or almost always. But there's a lot of kids that aren't always feeling happy, and we've got to be mindful of their mental health. So asked a different way, how are you feeling in terms of sad and hopeful? And if you look at the numbers on both of those graphics, you can see it's a little discouraging to see that, half of our students only feel hopeful sometime. It's a tough time for kids. And, it's a tough time dealing with things socially. It's a tough time dealing with things emotionally. And I think we need to be mindful of that. So that's very telling. And, our counseling crew and our building principals continue to work hard to support the mental health and social emotional wellness of our students. When we asked our parents, how they feel in terms of the following statements that are listed here, it does appear that most of our families that responded, their basic needs are being met, which is always important. We are able to provide support with food. If there are things that we can do to provide our families with basic needs, we have a great team of folks here that families know they can reach out to their school, but it does appear that a lot of our families, their basic needs are being met, but we do still have some that disagree. They don't feel that their basic needs are being met. We'll continue to work and reach out to those families. Again, the survey was anonymous, so we don't know exactly who those families are, so we encourage anybody who needs additional support to certainly reach out and let us know. When we asked our faculty and staff, this is kind of a broad question, but from their sense, what either do they need, or students or families? Again, we put this slide into the presentation to, indicate that mental and that social emotional health. Teachers are recognizing that that is something that continues to need attention for our students. And potentially for our faculty and staff as well. Any questions on those slides before I move on?
Yes, I have a question.
So I just am curious on that last slide, Jason. What does other? It says please specify, but it represented about a third of the responses there. Is there a general similar other, or are they all over the place other?
There was actually, it was a survey flaw. You could put other, but I couldn't collect responses on what other was. So I know there are other needs out there, so we'll continue to track on that, and we'll reach out again to try to gather some more data on that. So that's a great question. I am not a survey creation expert. I will fully attest to that, and there are a few things as we move through this that I would share with the board that I would do differently next time to gather more targeted data. Yep.
Define what we're talking about when we ask basic needs.
Yeah, in that survey for parents, there was another slide I could have put up. It looked similar to this one. And there were a whole bunch, but I couldn't get it to fit on the slide deck. But it is in the survey, and you can go back through and take a look at the survey. Mental and social emotional health was a high priority. Childcare was also a second high priority, indicated by parents. And again, I would encourage you to go back into that survey and take a look at that survey, but those results are there. So the next topic that we surveyed on was communication, and we just have 2 slides to share here. We wanted to know how are families feeling about the information that they have received since the start of school. Have you received adequate information? Roughly 70% felt that they had received adequate information from the school. While the remaining 30% said that they felt they received some, but not enough, or not enough at all. So again, we'll look at ways to try to continue to improve communication. We're hopeful that when our learning management system comes online, that will certainly be something I think that folks will see that will really help streamline communication. Again, we asked, we wanted to know, how do people get information? How are they gaining access to it? You can see the top responses really Google Classroom, email typically is the top getter. Social media outlets from the district, second highest, then the district's website. Following that were email exchanges with the teacher or principal. And then last but not least, we're picking up the phone and giving a phone call either to the teacher, the principal, or myself. So it's good to know where people are getting their information from, and we will continue to try to expand ways in which we can always do a better job at reaching out to our community. So kind of a meaty part of the survey, this is really what we're trying to get at, was what are the responses when it comes to learning? And so I know some of the questions are cut off here, but I highlighted kind of the 2 that showed we had kind of a higher response in the not true category, and they were significant because when you look at what those 2 questions asked, our students responded, the question was, am I learning new things while at home during remote learning? And you can see that 78 said mostly true and 15 said not true. And then when we followed up with, I feel like I am learning, 60% said mostly true and 12 said not true. So it does give us an indication. Again, we had a roughly, 150 students take this, but there are a handful of our students out there that do feel like they're having some real challenges with remote learning. When you take a look at these additional student responses, you can see, when we talk about how their ability to get information, when they have questions about their schoolwork, where they can find information about their schoolwork, learning new content and material. This one was more telling to me than the previous slide. And when you look at the yellow bars, the red bars, and the blue bars, a significant number of our students are indicating that, they're finding some new challenges this year. And that's not unexpected. I think, in lots of cases, some of our students are home, independently learning during remote days. We're trying to balance how to do in-person school and those hybrid remote days, how we utilize the time during check-in days on Wednesdays and what those days are looking like. And in the fall, this is how our students are indicating. They're indicating quite a few, 54%, saying that, they're finding some challenges learning new content and material. That's important, So as we move through the school year, obviously in the next survey that goes out, we would want to ask this question again with some, continued work and changes now that we've fallen into patterns, potentially make some changes. And do we get any responses that show any growth in this indicator? So certainly something we want to be paying attention to. So again, asking students, tell us about the difficulty of your schoolwork. So 80% said it was just right. You've got 17% that said it was too difficult, and very few students said that it was too easy. They might have seen that as a loaded question. I don't know, but they wanted us to know. So out of those 150, 80% thought it was just right. So this is the amount of schoolwork. So not only did we want to ask the last question, but we want to know the amount of work that students have received. So you can see about 60% said they're getting, they feel about just the right number of schoolwork assignments. 37% think there's too many schoolwork assignments. And very few students, again, think there are too few schoolwork assignments. So let's compare that a little bit with what the parent response is. And so the parent response is very different. We had 315 parent responses here, and of that, about 55% said that there was just the right amount, but a much larger portion felt that there were too few assignments. And we've heard that come up at board meetings, right? And the last few months, we've heard that as a comment on these hybrid remote days. My child does, an hour or two of schoolwork, and then they're done for the rest of the day. And, they're not connected or engaged to school, and there's too few assignments for students to do. You can see the indicator here that 7% felt that there were too many assignments being given to our students. Any questions on that before we move into some more slides or questions on remote data?
Shelley, please go ahead.
That last slide, that's all parent responses, because the student responses are all middle high school. So just comparative to how the middle high school parents are as a collective group have you pulled that data apart to look at?
I have not. The only way for me to pull that data apart is pulling it into a spreadsheet and then going through it, which I have not had the opportunity to do yet. And one of the earlier comment on survey formation would have been to pull out 4-6, to pull out 7-12. Really, the way this survey was designed was anybody in the hybrid model 4-12 would answer those questions. So students that answered, this is parent responses. This is not student responses. So this was done by the parents. So it could have been any parent that took the survey for 12, but until I get into that spreadsheet and really suss that out, it's not. I don't have that data and that graphic to show.
It would just be interesting to see how the student parent in a household comparison, and it may not even be the same parent students who responded, but just
Absolutely.
to like compare, because I'm not sure that we heard the same feelings from the 4-6 parents as we were from the high school, middle school parents, from the K-3 parents. So just that population of 350, what's it look like when you break it down? Just curious.
Okay, we'll make a note. We'll do that as an action. Yeah. Okay. And again, as we got data and started to process, you know, and when you create the survey, you know, you go through and you think you've hit and gotten everything you need. When you get the data back and you start looking at it, you start asking questions like, you know, pulling those things apart a little bit more would have been beneficial. We can do it. We just got to get into the spreadsheet and compare it. So we'll follow up with you on that. Were there any other questions? All right, so we wanted to dive into the remote instruction piece again. And again, we're going to go back to students. And again, let's remember this is collectively this is 412, but the only students that responded to this survey were secondary students. We didn't have any elementary students respond to this survey. So when asking our high school students about the amount of schoolwork, again, you can see, you know, about 70% of them said, and this is, again, on remote instructional days, they felt the number of schoolwork assignments was just right. You know, we're having a hard time finding students that are saying they're getting too few schoolwork assignments, with about 25% saying that they get too many. So a parent response, the following questions, please share whether your child has been given the right amount of schoolwork assignments. And this is a parent response. You can see the number 60, the respondents are different. That is the remote only group. So the remote only group, this is K-12. Anybody who was K-12 remote only responded to this, and quite a few felt that we were almost right on target with the number of assignments and the work that's being provided to students. So that feedback was beneficial. What's that? I think, Dan, you asked, how does it compare to non-remote students?
Parents. The parents look like by high number, they feel like there's just about the right assignments. I'm wondering if the hybrid parents feel the same way, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me see, and let me see if I get to that. I think I do coming up here in just a second. Let me see if not, but I'll come back to it if I don't. So the next slide, it goes back to students again. Let's talk about the schoolwork that you have been assigned on remote days. And again, this is not the amount of schoolwork, but is it challenging? Is it, you know, challenging our students enough? You see 40% said that it's just right. 52% think that it's somewhat difficult and challenging. And very few students have indicated that they feel it's too difficult or not challenging enough. Student responses to about how many hours a day. And again, you know, I tried to make sense of this pie chart and that little table off to the right-hand side. You know, this is interesting where hybrid students' responses, you know, how much time do they spend completing work? And this includes work that they're doing for all of their classes. So we know that for our hybrid students, sometimes the assignments are given during the in-person days. They go on the remote days. There's some additional supportive material provided for those students in some instances. Some instances they're connecting remotely, but about how much time, you know, do they spend on their schoolwork? And you can see that 33% spend about 2 hours a day. 3 to 5 hours a day, you see roughly 40%, and then about 10% of the students. And again, all secondary students, not 4-6 students in this, all secondary students that responded that they spend about those that take 6 to 7+ hours is about 10% of our students.
Then what would you expect to be normal?
I think we would, on a remote day, realistically probably look at somewhere in that 3 to 5 ballpark. I think, I think what we've heard collectively, and again, there's no playbook. I don't know the right answer, but what I would tell you is, we certainly want kids to feel like they're learning and they're engaged in schoolwork. I think the frustration that parents are feeling is, we've heard it before. My child goes home, they get all their schoolwork done, but they start at 7:30 in the morning. By 9 or 9:30, they're done. They've got the rest of the day, and they're not engaged in any school activities. So how can we possibly be learning like we are learning when we're in school for 6.5 hours a day, 5 days a week? And so, I think they're legitimate concerns. I think we've got to be mindful of that. I think 3 to 5 hours a day, one of the things we will tell you very clearly, I don't think anybody is recommending that, students are sitting in front of their computer all day long. They're engaged remotely all day long on a computer. Nobody wants to see them sitting 6 or 7 hours a day in front of the computer. And we know that has its drawbacks for kids as well. So we want a balance of that. So, I think it's roughly broken up this way because I think that 3 to 5 hour range is probably most desirable in terms of learning. So that could be connecting with teachers. It could be, sometimes it's 3 hours, sometimes it's 5 hours, but that level of engagement, I think, is probably what we would like to see happen on those remote days, not 0 to 2. So this graphic indicates on remote days, my child spends about how many hours. Parent responses, you can see 315. And again, this is all parents that took the survey. And you can see this is about 40% said 0 to 2 hours, 44% said 3 to 5, and 6 to 7+ hours, you can see there was about 4. We did have 43 individuals that said they weren't sure. So you knock that out of the mix there. But again, we've got about 60, potentially 60% of our students, 55% of our students that are, not hitting that sweet spot, so to speak, there, in that 3 to 5 hour range. Here is our, again, you see 60 responses here. This is our optional remote only students. And you can see that our optional remote only students who are doing full remote instruction are about 70% are right in that sweet spot of 3 to 5 hours a day, while about 6% are doing 2 hours, 0 to 2 hours of work, and that 18% at 6 to 7+ hours. It varies at the high school level, just because it's class dependent for those students. So there's a range of enrollment at the secondary level. At the elementary level, we are looking at class sizes at the elementary level for optional remote that pretty much will mirror traditional class sizes, probably around 22, 25 students in a class. So we found, I kind of pulled this one out too, because I think this is an important statistic to take a look at. And again, these are 315 responses. We would anticipate that the older the students are, certainly we would expect that mom and dad might be working and kids can be home alone learning. Again, we'd have to get into the data going back to Shelley's earlier question. We'd have to pull it out of the spreadsheet to see how many 4 to 6 parents that responded and took the survey, how they, if there is supervision, somebody at home to help provide support to those students while they're home on remote days. but we're going to have to assume, out of this 145 individuals that responded that their child is either home alone or sometimes they're home alone. Some of our 4 to 6 parents have to fall in that range. We know we have, kids at the elementary school that are coming from homes where mom and dad both have to go to work every day, and those students might sometimes be left on their own. So that's about 46%, of respondents on the survey across the board. So again, that is one we will dig a little deeper on, and gather some information on that so we can get a better handle on how many of our elementary students are home, either alone or sometimes alone while they're trying to learn. So the next question really that we pulled up here, I think it's important. This is a shout out to our teachers. Approximately 73% of respondents of parents felt that they had, enough instruction and guidance was provided for students to complete the work, which is great. I mean, we appreciate the hard work that our faculty and staff are doing across the board to provide that work for students. And it's encouraging to hear that parents feel that instruction and guidance has been, it has been, there's been enough there for them to be able to complete that work. Again, when you look at the opposite side of the pie chart, we will continue to work to make sure that there's enough. Even when we have in-person school, sometimes kids go home and they're not sure how to complete assignments and they're not sure what to do. And so we'll keep and continue to encourage folks to reach out to teachers to get questions answered. But we really want to, kind of make sure that we see that yellow and that green. I find it very, very hard to believe that there just has been no schoolwork assigned. I'm not quite sure why we have 6 respondents that way, but if that's the case, I would certainly hope that somebody is reaching out to the building principal or the teacher, myself, and giving us a heads up that they have not been given any schoolwork assignments. Questions or thoughts on that? And Dan, it doesn't look like that piece of the pie that you had asked about is in there, so we'll make sure we get that pointed out to you. From memory, I don't want to try to recall, but
Same question, Shelley.
We'll certainly get that information for you as well. Any other questions on that section before we move on? So I want to move into the challenges and spend a little bit of time tonight talking to you about, the survey data does kind of help give us some insight into how our students, community, faculty, and staff are feeling. And we know I'm not going to spend a lot of time on staffing challenges. This was a slide I took right out of our last board meeting's presentation. But what I think is important is to continue to remind you that staffing is a challenge. That is something we continue to struggle with on a regular basis. There are certainly days when we are asking faculty and staff to cover for their colleagues. Our building principals are going in and providing coverage when we're shorthanded. We know there's issues at the bus garage, and our custodians, we don't have the support we need in the event anybody goes out. Attendance has been really good. I think we've seen, I don't have the stat, but we know folks are, there's not a high usage of sick days right now. If I'm out sick, I'm likely having to get a doctor's note and come back in. There's a lot of extra protocol, and we certainly are encouraging everybody to stay home if they're not feeling well. But, in our organization and schools, you have to have the supervision. You got to have a substitute come in. You need bodies and some other, in the workforce outside of schools, you're not necessarily, if you're out sick one day, they're not getting sub to cover for you and to do the work that is needed to be done. So, our success, our ability to stay open really hinges on substitutes. So anybody who's online, and I don't know how many participants are in the meeting, Mr. Tuttle, but if anybody is looking for, a lot of our substitute jobs are part-time. 4 hours, couple hours during the day. So if you are home and you're looking for work, please give us a call. Let us know. We are happy to, we are always in need of substitutes. So let us know if you have any interest in doing that. So instructional challenges. Probably the biggest concern we've heard about is instructional contact time. And I've already alluded to that a little bit tonight. If you have a child who is home doing remote instruction on hybrid days, and they're given work in an hour or two, and they're getting good grades and they're staying up, there's a real concern and a question that folks are asking. How is the loss of instructional contact time impacting my child's education? We already know that from remote learning in the spring that there are concerns about learning gaps. We know we move into an environment now where we have restrictions on social distancing, mask wearing, and those limit our ability to run program like we've always run program. And so there is a loss of instructional contact time, right? That's just a given. And that's, I think every school district across the state and across the country is trying to figure out how to manage and deal with that. And so we have limitations on facilities. We're going to get into more of that in just a little bit. We're going to talk about some things that we want to take a look at. The grade 4-6 hybrid model, we've talked a little bit about that. We have had some, concerns expressed to the building principals and myself about the 4-6 instructional, the hybrid model, and, is it possible to get kids back into school? We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And that really revolves around remote instructional days. And I want to go back to what we've been saying all along. This, the issue with hybrid days has absolutely nothing to do with our faculty and staff. Our faculty and staff are working tremendously hard. They are putting in more time than they probably normally would put in under a typical year. I can say that with a great deal of confidence. And they've done a remarkable job, coming back and having to teach in a very different environment that they are, not at all accustomed to teaching in, and we're asking them to do things that they've never had to do before. And so, internally, we are working and listening to teachers and to faculty and staff, and we recognize that they have expressed some concerns and some challenges with the models that they've been asked to teach in. And so we've heard concerns from internal folks, we've heard concerns from outside, and from, the administrative level. As we started to move into the hybrid instructional piece, that was one area that, of course, we wanted to monitor and watch closely, and we've been talking about since the start of the school year. How is it going? You've got to give folks an opportunity to get underway, to get systems set up, to give kids the opportunity to learn routine, to engage students. And, at some point we have to come back and we have to revisit, is it the best we can do for our 4-6 students? And it's no fault of faculty and staff, but you're going to hear tonight, I think we might be able to do that better for some of our 4-6 students. We're also looking at the delivery of Wednesdays at the high school. We've heard some questions there, students right now on Wednesdays, they have a check-in with every single one of their teachers for all of their classes that they're doing, and there are pros and cons to that. But it's a short check-in time, and there are office hours for our teachers at the secondary level, and it is a time for teachers to connect with kids, provide a different level of support. But there are also some challenges when we go back to that instructional contact time, and we're looking at Wednesday instructional time and asking ourselves, can we deliver it differently and provide more instructional contact time between teachers and students? So that's something we are certainly considering as well. Curriculum pacing, we've talked a little bit about this already. It's our teachers, as they provide lessons, they're not providing a new lesson just on the days where they're in person. Teachers are working hard to scaffold their lessons to continue to move through the curriculum throughout the course of the year. I've said this at the last meeting, I'll say it again. There are challenges with getting through the full curriculum. There are. It's just inherent in the way we're doing business now, not only for Skodak, but for schools all across New York State. Getting through everything you need to get through in the same manner that we did it in person is very challenging. So as we have done in the spring, prioritizing standards, right? We have some collective work that was done and through our BOCEs to really prioritize our standards. And we start with those standards that we know are most critical, and we continue to build in those other standards that are not as critical. Teachers are not just providing new lessons on in-person days. I think that's important for everybody to understand. Those lessons that carry over are extensions of what's happening, are building into the next lesson, presetting kids for lessons to come. And again, this goes back, and we need to give credit to our teachers for thinking, how am I going to continue to move the mark from the beginning of the year to the end of the year? By no means is it perfect. I'm going to tell you that right now. I think there are going to be some challenges, and we do not have the same amount of instructional contact time. Our teachers are working tremendously hard to provide the curriculum, but the reality is the kids are not in front of us every day, 5 days a week. So it presents challenges in terms of doing that as meaningfully with engagement and retention that we would want kids to get that content. Our elective classes at the high school are real challenges. Those are something we need to talk about too, because as you know, when kids come to in-person learning, they're coming and they're getting 4 core classes and language. So science, social, ELA, math, and language are provided in person. When cohorts have aligned and schedules have aligned, there are opportunities for very small groups of in-person instruction from our elective teachers, but our electives are primarily being taught remotely. Those are happening on remote days for students. So our secondary students are connecting and remoting in with teachers and getting their electives done remotely. I'm going to come back to cohorting, but special area courses. So when we talk about physical education and music, art, all of those things primarily at the secondary level are all being done remotely. We are looking at opportunities for in-person. We do art on a cart at the elementary school. PE teachers are taking the students outside for PE class when they're able to do that. But primarily those special area courses are not being delivered the way they used to do, and they look very different at the secondary level. So we are, again, looking at some solutions to that. As we move forward, knowing what we know now, are there opportunities for us to provide in-person opportunities, let's say in the arts, in band, chorus, how do we work with those teachers and those students to be able to provide those opportunities safely? So now that we're in the building and we've lived it a little bit, we feel we can begin to explore those opportunities. Cohorting has been a challenge. So not every school in the capital region followed the guidance and went with a cohorted model. So some cohorts are A-day students, right? They just come in and run their normal schedule. So if I have if you think about our high school, our schedule from last year, our block schedule, we have an A, B, C, D day. A, C, B, D days are the same, right? So I run an A, B, C, D day. Some minor changes on those schedules, but an A and a C day are going to look very similar, and a B and a D day. So if I'm doing two in-person days, like a lot of our schools are doing, and they're following a normal schedule, they'll get an AC day on one day they go in, they'll get a BD day on another, the second day they go in. So they're really seeing their core teachers once in a week. We're doing it twice in a week in our model, the way we've presented this. But cohorting provides it's created a lot of challenges for us. It's the safest way to do it. If we happen to get a positive case in a cohorted model, that cohort, who is primarily together for a large chunk of the day, potentially has to quarantine. But if I'm switching classes and I'm going from one class to another to, and I'm with different kids throughout the course of the day, there are going to be more kids that are impacted by that. So we still feel like cohorting was the right thing to do. And the way we have designed our academic program allows for more in-person instruction than some of the other area schools. Maybe some have more than us, but I can tell you when we follow that, I'm in school for 2 days a week and I'm following a traditional schedule. I'm an AC day one day and I'm a BD the next day. And kids are only seeing and making contact with their teachers in those classes 1 day a week. We're doing it 2 days a week and we're looking at ways to increase that on Wednesdays. So I think that's important to note. Technology is, I will tell you, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for us every board meeting, right? We sit and we have to get our technology up and running, but we need, technology to run perfectly for almost every single model that we are doing in school. And technology continues to be a challenge. Implementing systems is a challenge, right? We wanted Canvas to be up and running. It's not up and running yet. We know it'll improve system. We know it'll improve communication. There are lots of things we need to do, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge getting that out of the gate and up and running. And so we continue to work at that. We do anticipate, fingers crossed, this coming week, we will have rollout at the secondary level, followed by a rollout shortly thereafter at the elementary school. So that one is almost out of the gate completely, but again, it'll take us some time to implement that appropriately. And, some of the other things I'll just touch on here with technology, consistency in training. We had a parent call in at our last board meeting and made some great comments. Like, there are things you can do tomorrow to improve your remote instructional days. That's absolutely true. Some of our teachers do those things. Some of our teachers don't do those things. And so, it's never been prescriptive of administration here to say, every teacher, you do this, right? We provide opportunities. We help with subscriptions. We provide resources. In some instances, we provide training to teachers. And that was one thing we focused on prior to the start of school, was trying to engage in some professional development in this area. But we've never went into, an individual teacher's classroom and said, here's what you need to do, right? We haven't. So we talk about these expectations and talk about ways to connect with kids. But like everybody in this room, when you walk into a board meeting and you sit down, there's a level of comfort you have in booting up your machine and connecting it and getting it ready to go, while others are not. Teachers are no different. They're people. They were trained in education. They weren't trained in technology. So we bring folks along the way because we know it's a tool that our teachers use and we know how effective it is. But consistently applying that is not easy. And so we know there are things. We know we have some educators that are talented in the area of technology, that are leaders not only in our district, leaders across New York State, that are going nationwide and presenting on technology that they use in the classroom. We leverage those folks to help train faculty and staff, but their time is limited. They have a job. So, they are very giving of their time. We have a few programs in place, our PD Leader program that allows folks to be compensated for their time, and our teachers that are engaged in that to receive in-service credit for the work that they do outside of their contractual day that's solely related to technology or other areas that are going to improve professional practice. And right now it's heavily focused on technology and leveraging our own people to provide professional development.
Jason?
Yeah.
We got a question.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we need to add to systems is Zern. Zern had a major impact because we had a licensing issue in bringing Zern on early in grade 4 or 5. What has helped in the hybrid system is now with Zern, you're able to have lessons assigned consecutively A, B, C, D, because it allows a progressive program in the mathematics area to bring people through third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. That really did impact us early on because that was a licensing issue because it was decided to be used late in the game. So that I think has made a positive impact, but it is another thing to add to implementing systems because Zern would have made a really big difference, I think, in your early progress with your hybrid.
Sure. And I appreciate that comment. And again, when we looked at the start of the school year and what folks would need, and we had, regular communication with folks over the summer, and we're talking about needs. Again, I think we try to be, we have to be mindful. There's a process with Ed Law 2D, which is a new law where we have to make sure that any vendor that we purchase any kind of product through where student information goes, that it's protected under the laws in New York State. And so, it usually slows things down for us a little bit in getting some of these systems up and running, because if it's not already vetted through our BOCES or through NARIC, any of these other places, we have to go through and make sure that it's Ed Law 2D compliant. So it's actually presented a challenge. So for instance, I know elementary folks are probably familiar with Class Dojo. There's a lot of teachers that use that. Back in the day, you could just sign up for a free account. You upload your students into there. I'm communicating, and parents have a way to kind of see what's happening. Well, that is not was not Ed Law 2D compliant. So we've had to look and make sure either any of the systems that we're using are Ed Law 2D compliant, or before we purchase any, that process is completely vetted. So it's the red tape of everything. And then, of course, once we get into actually moving through purchasing, as mentioned with Canvas, everybody under the sun is trying to get their hands on stuff. So they can't get you onboarded as fast as they want to get you onboarded. And so there are real challenges with bringing new systems online at the beginning of the year, in addition to some of the other systems that we have to bring along, like My Learning Plan and some of these other ones that we have to roll over and get them in year out. So I appreciate that comment, Mike. It's absolutely true. We want to provide those resources. Sometimes there's a lag and a delay. And, we've worked hard with teachers to try to get them the resources they've asked for and they've needed. But, it doesn't, like I said with Canvas, it just doesn't always happen as quickly as we would like it to. One other interesting piece that I'll mention under technology is the full remote instruction for K-3. Right now, with our 4-6 hybrid model, so all of our students really 412 have a Chromebook. So we've kind of pilfered Chromebooks a little bit from the elementary school and the K-3 rooms to make sure that whatever we had available district-wide, that we could provide those Chromebooks to students 412. So if tomorrow we had to go full remote K-3, which could happen, right? We get a positive case or two. We need to be able to, we've got a plan in place. We are surveying, once again, all of our K-3 parents, name, address. Do you have a device at home that your child could use? Do you need a school-issued device? So if I got a call, this evening that we had a positive case and we needed to go remote at the elementary school, we could collectively look at our spreadsheet, know exactly who needs a device. We have a plan for where we would get that device, but then it would, I'm going to tell you right now, what we would do is rally at the elementary school. We have a list. There would probably be, 5 to 10 of us grabbing devices, picking off the list and driving to homes and dropping off devices. What we don't want to see happen is us going on full remote and those kids not having access to technology because they need to connect remotely. So we had a pretty good indication in the spring, but we do have new kindergarten students that weren't with us in the spring that are with us now. And we need to survey those families and be ready to go because they don't have a one-to-one device at K-3 level. Everybody else does, but that proves to be a challenge. So in the midst of contact tracing and potentially making decisions on remote instruction, we have to be mindful that we've got to be able to get those devices to our students that need them for instruction. So I don't know whether that's a shortfall, but that is a real challenge that we're faced with in all of this. I want to talk about some other challenges here from that. We'll open up for questions here in just a moment, but transportation ridership continues to be a challenge. We are putting one student on every seat. Siblings are sitting together. It puts about 22 students on a 66 passenger bus. So it really is limiting our options. And a lot of those runs are full, but that will be a challenge ongoing throughout the course of the year. There's no doubt about that. Athletics. I'm very happy to say we had a successful fall season. We talked a little bit about this at the last meeting as well. Students have had great experience, but we still have zero direction on winter sports. So we are collecting athletic forms for our student athletes. In the event that we get the green light to be able to do it, we can do it safely. We want to be able to do that for students, but there are certainly challenges associated with that. Hands down. Right now, we use part of our high school gym for a cafeteria. Space is used very differently now. And so our ability to be able to even get into a space to practice, if it's allowable, what do you do for games? It's challenging. There's no easy solution to it. It's a lot of work moving these desks. I move them around for the board meetings here, but there's 50 plus desks in the gym right now, and those would all need to probably be removed and then put back in for school the next day. So some real challenges with space. And again, I find myself continuing to be frustrated with the lack of direction and guidance provided for sports. Here we are, beginning of November. Right now, they're scheduled to start at the end of November. But with no direction, I'm not sure that will actually take place. I don't know about you, but I want to give our kids an opportunity, but I'm a little reluctant to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do it without being given the green light to do it. And then, we end up on the news if we're part of a problem or an outbreak that might occur as a result. So as I've said before, and I think our student athletes, I hope they all know this. We did it in the fall. It's a lot of work, but we did it. If we can do it and it's allowable in the winter, we will do it. We'll find a way to make it happen. We will do our best to find a way, but there are going to be real challenges, especially with indoors. Our spaces and our facilities are maxed. Don't get the type of use, right? You go to the soccer field, it's a soccer field. We're using our space very differently now for instruction. So when it comes to indoor activities, it's a challenge. Social opportunities and gatherings. We've started to hear, we think about, let me take you back a few months to graduation, right? All this, I got to tell you, the sleepless nights around graduation for Miss Hill and her team at the high school, for me, making decisions on what are we going to do for graduation. We need to make it special for this group of seniors. Well, this group of seniors that we have roaming our halls this year, are looking at having their full year impacted to some capacity. And when you look at social opportunities and gatherings, right, we're talking about things like pep rally. We, traditionally do at the high school, on fire on fall sports weekend. Things that really help keep kids connected to their school, that allow safe, opportunities for them to be together and make memories, especially their final year, not only for the seniors, but for all of our students. We look at monthly morning assembly. You're looking at some, other opportunities for these rites of passage. We just had Halloween come and go with first time in 16 years I've been here that we haven't really had a Halloween parade where that principal has led, and we invite the community to come and be part of that. And, it's hard for kids. It's hard for parents. And those social opportunities and gatherings continues to be a challenge. We can't invite the senior class to come for a bonfire, even if it's outside. It's a social gathering. Kids would have to stay socially distant. It's a real challenge to manage some of that stuff. And our students have done great. They've done a great job. But we have to be mindful that we've got to be respectful of the guidance that's been put in place And as hard as it might be, we need to look at other opportunities for our kids to engage. And virtually doesn't cut it for them. It does in some instances, but it doesn't in others. And so, there's no easy answers to any of this stuff. And I can tell you, not only are we struggling with it here, but our colleagues, my colleagues that I talk to in the Questar 3 BOCES, and we know all around the region, all around the state, everybody is, and we're asking each other, what are you doing for your kids? Anybody have any good ideas? Because we're not keeping that stuff quiet. We want all kids to have a good experience, whether you go to Skodak or Tamarack or Averill Park or East Greenbush, it makes no difference. So we're all working together to try to come up with and continue to brainstorm. I know not only am I doing that with my colleagues, Ms. Hill, Mr. Derby, they have principal meetings that they go to, and it's a great opportunity for them to share with their colleagues, talk about challenges, and try to come up with solutions. These rites of passage, we can't undersell how important they are. And we're going to hear about that more and more as the senior class progresses to the end of the year. I can already feel it coming. We need more opportunities for our kids. And I just have to be honest, for the school to provide those opportunities, it's a real challenge. It's not that we don't want to do that, but it is a real challenge. And let's be honest, we're getting mixed messages, right? So we can run fall sports and we can blend cohorts and we can do those things and play other schools, but we can't do social gatherings to some degree. And why not? And kids are asking those questions. And so, those are fair questions to ask. Sports, we get definite guidance. We get guidance on what we're supposed to do in terms of gathering at school. Those are written right into our plan. And we can't just ignore what has been written into the plan based on guidance. We just can't do that. So I'm almost done. I'm going to take a sip of water, let you ask some questions here. But time, I can't even begin to tell you how much of a challenge time is. Meetings, planning and collaboration for teachers, right? There's not enough time for folks to be together, to plan appropriately, to gather input. I throw this out to all of you, right? So we absolutely want input from our teachers. I've heard that at board meetings. We talking to your teachers and gathering what's best to make some decisions. Well, they come in and they have work to do, and they have a planning period that is contractual where they get planning work done. And sometimes we meet with them on planning periods, other times we don't. And then when kids leave, their contractual day ends, right? And teachers are very generous with their time. There's tons of folks that stay before and after, but we don't have unlimited time to get together with teachers to get feedback and input. And, I've said this all along, our faculty association, our teachers have been tremendously generous with their time. They spend a lot of time throughout the course of the summer, but now that we have kids and we're engaged back in regular work, even if it looks different, we are hard pressed for time. We could use more of it together to plan and to work through and gather feedback and work with individuals. Some of these things that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes with options for 4-6, and we're going to go through some of those things. We're going to talk about that. We can't sit with 4-6 teachers every day to do it. We just, it's not fair to them. They have a life outside of school. But we are meeting with them and and they're being very generous, but there's just not enough time to do that. Not to mention, we all have different aspects of our work that we're doing all day long. There are things that need to get done. So time, I don't think we ever have enough of it in general. The dashboard survey, Shelley will tell you, that is cumbersome and it changes. And we are continually running into issues with gathering that data, making sure it's accurate. The state has sent out warning letters for people that are doing it incorrectly and threatening disciplinary action, removal of certifications if you don't do it right. And it's crazy. It's something we've never done before. It takes a little while to go through and get that thing done. We know it's necessary. We know it's for transparency, but it's a challenge. There's a whole host of human resource related issues stemming from COVID. I don't have to tell you that. But even, you know, when you hear me talk about the use of a sick day, you know, it's now we need to know, are you out because it's COVID related? Is it not COVID related? If it is, what are we doing? And following up, and that takes time. So somebody's got to make those phone calls and do that. You know, in terms of knock on wood, we haven't done it yet, but contact tracing, I got to tell you, you know, when we get a positive, it is, we need seating charts in every room, what activities were being done in the room, who was close, were they closer for more than 10 to 15 minutes? You know, did they travel at all during their day? Did they eat in their classroom? Who were they around in lunch? Like, you know, we've got to be ready to provide the Department of Health all of that information as soon as that positive case comes in. So hopefully we don't have to have that. I've already talked a little bit about the travel advisory and how that's changed, but doctor's notes and COVID tests, you know, I want to say as of like 2 weeks ago, we had about 125 resolved issues where our nurses had sent kids home that were symptomatic and needed to come back with a doctor's note or a negative COVID test. And we've had, like I said, about 2 weeks ago, about 125 instances of that occurring. And then parents needing to follow up with a doctor or take their child for a negative COVID test, and in some instances, both. Grab a drink of water here real quick. If anybody's got any questions or thoughts on any of those so far?
See one, but I do. It actually follows right up on that last topic that you were speaking about. So moving into this winter and the flu season, you're obviously going to have more symptoms. So you're going to have kids coming to school with more symptoms because they're flu symptoms and not necessarily COVID symptoms, although some of them are the same. So does that mean that they're out until they get the doctor's permission to come back in?
Doctor, negative COVID test, and symptom free for 48 hours.
Right. So you can see the administration of that already is going to go through the roof.
So, you know, there's two schools of thought on it because it is cold and flu season for sure. People are going to catch cold and flu, but look at what we're doing. We're staying away from each other. We're wearing masks. We're sanitizing and washing our hands, probably more so than we ever have. You know, the same things that protect us from COVID are the same things that protect us from the flu. So, you know, one could argue that, you know, we're being very preventative and cautious. And hopefully, you know, if we continue to be diligent in our hand hygiene and doing the things we need to do, hopefully that, you know, we keep those numbers down as well. So I don't know. I can't look into that crystal ball, but we do anticipate usually this time of year, we get more sniffles and coughs and sneezes. And if that's the case, without fail, we've got a protocol. We've been very successful so far. We're gonna, you know, we're gonna just kind of stay diligent, stay the course, keep doing what we're doing. But it's another, let's be honest, it's another strain and a burden that our parents have to face. It's not easy, especially if I'm too, you know, mom and dad both work. Now I'm symptomatic. I got to come get my child from school. I've got to arrange for a doctor to clear them. Maybe I got to take them for a COVID test. And until I get all that stuff done, you know, I got to be home. You know, it is a real strain and burden on our families. And we don't make those calls lightly, but we also have to take any of those symptoms seriously. It's just what we have to do to keep for the safety of the public health for everybody within the building.
And just to put it out there, that's following DOH guidelines.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we're not making up those rules on our own.
We are not.
Okay.
No. And I think I had mentioned there was a toolkit that the Department of Health provided after the opening of school that really clarified some of that protocol for us, which there was some questions at the beginning, but it really clarified that for us, which is helpful. And again, Department of Health has been pretty good in their guidance on that, and our local county health, our Rensselaer County Department of Health has been an outstanding partner. We can call anytime and ask questions, and they've been very good at helping us with some of those things. But what they can't do is overrule New York State Department of Health. So if they're not clear on guidance, they can give us what they would do, but they will be very cautious to make sure that they don't give us any advice that would break what the New York State Department of Health is telling us to do. So every county Department of Health handles things a little bit differently. They're not 100% consistent, and we found that out through our BOCES, because we've got Rensselaer, Columbia, and Greene County schools that all get together in our BOCES. So the 3 different Department of Healths are giving advice to the schools within their counties. And we talk about those issues collectively, and we know that there's some discrepancy. They're all doing great work, working incredibly hard. To just a couple of different schools of thought on that. Nothing that would put anybody at danger, but it's caused some confusion for us because we're troubleshooting off of one another and trying to solve some of these challenges. Any other thoughts or questions before I move on to considerations?
I have a quick question here. Do you hear me, Jason? Yes, you hear me?
Mike, yep, go. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
All right. You know, I'm just going back to your survey. I was, you know, there's a lot of good information in that, and we don't do a survey every year, do we?
Typically not. No.
Yeah, because one of the things I thought I heard somebody raise this, it would be nice to be able to compare the responses we're getting now with a typical year, and maybe that's something in a year or two when things become typical again we can do, just to kind of see, you know, do parents think their kids have enough homework? Is it too much? Whatever. When we're back in the in what we hope will be the normal setting, but that's just a comment. About the survey, just your overview, you know, the main takeaways, your main takeaways. I was curious what your, you know, what you felt was most positive about it and most concerning from your perspective.
Both really good questions. I think probably the most positive, I will tell you the feedback received about you know, our ability to reopen school, how gracious folks were. That was very positive. I was very pleased to hear, you know, the communication responses were very good. You know, I think we're always going to be challenged with making and pleasing everybody 100%. But overall, when you're looking at the number of folks that seem satisfied with the information they're getting from the school and you know, their teachers in the district, that's important. We've talked about communication and trying to make sure communication is going well. And overall, you know, I think folks are very appreciative. We got a lot of the narrative responses are a little bit more telling to me than, you know, the pie charts and the line graphs and some of those things, because they're more forthcoming and honest. And so, although there are some that make you cringe when you read them, but you need that critical feedback as well. You know, I do think the feedback overall, folks appear very grateful and are very much appreciative of the work that's going on here. And I think, you know, we can't undersell that importance to our school community, our faculty and staff, our custodians, our bus drivers, folks that come in and you know, make this happen every day. It is hard. It's the hardest time we have ever been in education for all of us across the board. And the support felt by our parents in that survey does not go unnoticed. And I'm very proud of that. And I think I'm proud of our teachers and our district for the work that we're doing there. Most concerning, you know, I think when we talk about some of the things that we've indicated tonight, I got to tell you, I think mental health and social emotional wellness is still a concern. I will tell you, I think curriculum and instructional contact time is a concern. It's not, and I will just share with you, it's not only a concern here, it's a concern everywhere. And there are no easy solutions to how to make that better. I think we're more fortunate than most that we have a talented group of folks that is super committed to their kids and doing the work they need to do every day. And they've done a tremendously good job. And so, you know, it's hard when you approach folks that are, you know, they're stressed. They've worked very hard. And, you know, you come at them with critical feedback, right? And I've said over and over again, it is not for lack of effort or trying or any of those things, but we do, I think, owe it to our kids to continue to take a look at how we improve the experience for them. That's what we're in the business of doing. And, you know, although challenging and hard for the adults in the organization, we owe it to our kids, in my opinion, to try to make it as good as it can be. And so if we can be better, even if it's not ideal for us, we should try to be better. And there's no easy solution. Somebody's going to be unhappy about something. It's not that those considerations aren't thought of and cared about, but those are the biggest things to me, Mike. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent a little bit here, but you know, that piece is probably the most concerning to me. I think there is a real concern about the lack of instructional contact time. And so, you know, and there's no way to replace that other than putting a child in front of a teacher.
Yep.
There's just no other way to do that. And we're, you know, not only in Skodak, but all over the place, folks are struggling with how to make it as good as it can be for kids in our new environment.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yep. And I do appreciate your comments on the survey too, Mike. I think I remember way back when, maybe in March or April, you asked a question about lessons learned and what are things you're going to think about moving forward. You know, we want to be careful that we don't do survey fatigue. Folks are very motivated to fill out surveys now to give you feedback on the work that's happening. You know, we've tried to do some surveys and stuff with mixed results in the past, but maybe our new norm and engaging with our community a little bit different. Even if we utilize virtual meetings and other avenues to engage our community instead of expecting everybody to come in, I think we can learn some real lessons from all of this and hopefully continue that engagement.
Yeah, well, you know, for a survey, I mean, as a parent, I'd be, you know, very interested to do one in this setting, and it looked like you had good response rate, but to get a survey every year, pretty soon you would just say, I'm not doing it. So maybe it's, you know, every few years. But anyway, just something that occurred to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Great point. All right, so let's talk about...
Jason, if I could, just before we head into considerations of sweeteners, are there any other comments on the survey portion? I just felt like, you know, two comments on surveys in general. I think we all know that usually when people fill out surveys, I would say that generally it's the unhappy people who fill out surveys. You know, the people who are happy don't tend to fill out surveys as much as everything's going fine. You don't really have the prod to do it. So looking at the survey, you know, we ran the spectrum. We ran the spectrum of absolutely everything is being taken care of and I'm 100% happy, to I think there was at least one comment that said absolutely not happy with anything. And I think in many surveys, especially that businesses do, they tend to throw out your outliers, and you take what's in the middle. And as long as you're there, then you know you're satisfying the majority. And you know, I think we all know that we don't satisfy 100%. So if we're satisfying the majority, then I think we're in the ballpark. You know, and understanding that the virtual days is definitely an issue. And it's hard because I think virtual learning requires independent learning, and that's not everyone can do independent learning. Obviously, the younger the kids are, that's very difficult. And then even when you get into the high school, just some are going to be better at it than others. Self-motivators will do better. You know, if you have the drive. Without the drive, it's difficult. And we all know in high school, you know, not everybody at that age. I wasn't, so I don't know how I would have done in this environment. I really don't. Later on in life, okay, but at this time, I don't know. Mr. Charsky.
Yeah, I brought this up before, you know, on the board a zillion years. That's a really good point. When you're doing any type of statistic or any type of analysis, you do have to throw away the outliers. And I hear your point. I understand your point. You want every student to have a great experience. I would focus on drilling down the middle of the survey. I would take away, I forgot the colors on the bottom, the colors on the top. I'd be more interested in those who are in the middle. And I would drill down more about why there, because I think you'll get a really good feel for, or at least a better feel for the deeper what's going on. Like I say, I forgot about that, Mike, and that's a really great point. I think we do need to throw away the outliers. I really do. I think you'd get more of a story if you do drill down that middle.
Typically, you know, we know it doesn't do us a lot of good to spend time on those folks that are constantly telling you you're wonderful and everything is perfect. And on the other end, we also know that there are always going to be some individuals that no matter what you do, it's never going to be good enough. And you got to kind of, kind of find yourself through the weeds there and kind of focus on really the meat of what's happening. So I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's that is something we'll take a look at doing. And again, it's hard when you present the data. And I think I would probably create a different survey that would allow us to be able to compare things a little bit different. I'll learn along the way too. I'll become a better survey creator as we move forward. But I think to Mr. Heiser's point, I think it's, and we said we would do this in the plan, reach out and engage the community continuously throughout the course of this process. So this, we will probably do one, every quarter as, we continue to move forward, continue to make adjustments and changes, and we'll want to be able to compare some of that information and take a look at what we're doing there. I think it's important to note when Mike says that, when he was in high school, he's not sure he'd be able to do this. One of the things we've been talking about at our BOCEs is we know that we have some kids that have thrived not being in school. They had anxieties about coming into school. It was not a great experience, but they were forced to come in. It has re-engaged some conversation at our BOCEs talking about the possibility of doing a regional virtual high school. Is this something we could continue afterwards and allow kids the opportunity to participate remotely? Kids go to Tech Valley High School. Why couldn't they go to a virtual high school? That's something that made them feel better about their experience and what they wanted to do. And so, we talk about, instructional contact time. And the problem is we've got lots of different models of instruction that are going on. So it's not all the same. It's not all the same. The remote, full optional remote is not the same as 4-6 remote hybrid days, which is not the same as 7-12 hybrid days. They're all different. And so depending on where you fall in this thing, they all look a little bit different. So let's just talk about some of the work that's going on here and some things we've mulled over. And again, I sat at our last board meeting and we talked a little bit about considerations. And again, you'll see at the top of this slide, it talks about considerations for grades 4 through 12. So in our plan, as I've mentioned to you before, it does talk about, as we move through the year, looking at increased opportunities to bring kids back into the school environment. It talks about that in the plan. It talks about, and I've mentioned some of those things to you, like, can we do jazz band or chorus? Now that we've been in and our teachers have done a good job, where can we seek out opportunities? We also know that, again, going back to where we were before, most folks are not going to be satisfied until we get our kids back full time. So how do we look at increasing that instructional time where in some instances, if I'm remote, I've got a teacher who's constantly engaged with me. But in other instances, I've got a teacher who's got a full class of kids in front of them or a small cohort of kids in front of them, and then another cohort potentially that's remote. That's our 4-6 folks, Our K-3 folks, let's not undersell the job that our K-3 folks are doing, where, they're really kind of between two classrooms. There's a TA on one side and a teacher on the other, and half their cohorts are in both sides of the room. They're showing up on the screen in one room and instructing to those kids on one side, and the teacher and TA will be back and forth. That's the model we're using in K-3. And so the teacher will change sides on occasion or days or daily. A little different depending on where you go, but that's what they choose to do. And then once you hit the secondary level, as mentioned, our kids are in person for core instructional classes, getting all electives and special classes typically on their remote days, and then they're all doing check-ins on Wednesdays. And so, you know, if I'm a student with one elective, my hybrid day at the high school is pretty minimal. Those teachers are still assigning coursework, right? Kids have to be independent. They can't just do the work on in-person days. There's instruction that's assigned for those kids, and our teachers need to keep up with all of those things, and then they have the check-in days on Wednesdays. And so, you know, how do we ease the burden for our instructors, our teachers? How do we ease the burden for our students and our families at home and our parents? We've got to be open to looking at what is realistic and what can we do, even if it's not desirable in terms of location and space. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Create consistency of schedules for teachers and students, right? The more normal we can make it, the easier it is for everybody. It's easier for parents to follow along and understand what's happening. It's easier for kids to manage. It's easier for our teachers to plan and provide instructional experiences. It's easier to create consistent expectations. You heard me. Consistency is hard when you're in all different models. I can't ask our 4-6 teachers to do the same thing on hybrid days that we're able to ask our full remote teachers or some of our other teachers. They're in very different circumstances. It can't all be the same. Consistency and expectations are challenging because they're different. They're different at each of these bands that we have. And again, you know, any changes we make, we want to provide opportunities for more individual support for students. Getting them back in social environments. Yeah, we're not overly social. We're not sitting in circle time on the rug anymore doing those things, but kids being around their friends, it still feels and sounds like school to some degree when you're here. But I'll tell you, it's challenging for our kids going back to, you know, where they're at. So changes being explored. We talked a little bit about restructuring Wednesdays for grades 7 through 12. That's something we're exploring now as a possible option. You know, could we, instead of doing check-ins, alternate A groups and B groups every week and provide increased instructional contact time with teachers on Wednesday instead of just doing short check-ins for all of our classes? And how do we preserve some of the benefits that we know for some of our elective classes or special area classes that have really found the value in being able to have that additional day to check in? And, you know, so again, this internal conversation going on, and there's pros and cons. If we do something, it impacts something else. So I've shared with the board, we have considered 5 options for looking at trying to increase instructional contact time for our 4-6 students. And I think I will tell you, in internal conversations with teachers initially, as the year has gotten underway, you know, there's some challenges there. You know, our principals have heard comments like, you know, this is tough to sustain all year long. This is taking its toll. It's hard. So we want to be mindful and responsive to that. We want to take a look at that feedback. We know that we've heard here at the board level and from some parents calling in that there's some concerns about the amount of engagement on hybrid days. And again, there's no playbook for this, so there's no right or wrong answer. But, you know, as we have opened the doors, as we have fallen into routines and we know what things we can do well, you know, it's hard to argue against trying to find opportunities to bring our kids back more if we can do that, and we can do it safely. I wouldn't be sitting here tonight talking to you about this if I didn't think we could do it safely, but it's going to look different. And one would be able to argue anything on this, right? Yes, I'm blending 2 cohorts of kids now. I have to bring them all back together. So yes, inherently there's some risk for our kids, at least initially, getting back together before they become a cohort by themselves. For our educators, as long as we're in appropriate space and we're socially distant and we're wearing masks and we're doing things that we need to do, We are certainly confident and in checking with Needham Risk Management, the Rensselaer County Department of Health, my colleagues that teach in other districts or superintendents in other districts. Increasing cohort size in a room and in space is certainly something that you can do as long as you follow those guidelines and do it safely. So there's going to be arguments on either way, right? Space isn't going to be great. I can't do it in the space. The space isn't appropriate for me to be teaching in. It's not going to be good. There's going to be sound echoing around. I get it. I understand all of those things, and I recognize some of those concerns. And I think that's on the district to try to remedy those concerns. I think it's probably more appropriate to try to address some of those concerns. I think when you look at the options that are given, it's hard to argue not to bring those kids back. It's on us to look and find out ways to make the space as appropriate as it can be. I would almost think having kids back more regularly and full time would be preferable to remote days with the kids being home by themselves or their families. Again, I think we owe it to everybody. We've always prided ourselves on doing what's in the best interest of students, right? How many times have we said that over and over as a board, as a faculty and staff, as an administration? We say it over and over, and we mean it. And these times become really challenging because we've got to consider all of those things. And I got to tell you again, I don't want to be doing any of this stuff. I don't want to be doing any of it. But what's the lesser of the two evils? Is it better to keep the kids home remotely, or is it better to creatively look at some of our larger spaces and try to get our kids back more regularly? So let me just talk you through. I'm not going to go through that analysis of the in-person instruction. That is on board docs for our community to take a look at. It is not all inclusive. I will tell you, I'm sure there are things on there that, there are probably things that are not on that list that should be on that list. But as we start to go through and put that list together, I want folks to understand the amount of thinking and logistical, play that comes into even making what seems to be a simple move. So I'm going to just go through options A through E quickly. I want to kind of share with you our line of thinking here. So option A, grades 4 and 5, we potentially would put at CES. We are looking at an option of moving grade 6 to the junior senior high school. The 3 spaces that were initially looked at in this potential proposal is the space the board is in right now, the MUF. Close this door. You can put a class of 23 students in the MUF. You have the space behind me, which would be another classroom in the auditorium where you could put a class of 23 to 25 students in the auditorium. And then the upstairs, the library, which is not open to classes. It's really used as more of a faculty workspace currently, would be converted into a possible classroom for 6th grade up in the library. So obviously, there are some pros to doing that in terms of logistics. We don't maximize our transportation runs at the junior senior high school, so we could easily accommodate 6th grade being transported to the junior senior high school. That is one issue where if we try to keep everybody at the elementary school, we're at capacity, we're going to be overflowing in capacity on our buses, and that's going to present to be a real challenge. And I've got some graphics I can bring up to kind of show you how the buildings would be utilized. This, isn't taken lightly. We're asking 6th grade midstream to move to the junior senior high school, where we typically do transitional activities for kids that are ready to come up to the junior senior high school. So yeah, I can imagine there's probably some anxious parents going, my 6th grader's going where? Up to the junior senior high school. What's that going to look like? They're going to be roaming the halls with seniors. This is going to be a disaster. I don't think that would be the case. Again, we talk about cohorts. Our kids are primarily in their classroom space that they're assigned to be in with very minimal transition throughout the building. Once our students are assigned to these spaces, they, of course, would be able to use the outside classroom and the facilities are around here. But much like at the elementary school, once you go and you're in class, you're in class. And so there's not a lot of travel that would take place there. So I would tell you that we've already discussed, any changes that would take place. There's full intention of doing informational nights for parents at particular grade levels. We're not completely done working through problems and concerns that our faculty and staff might have. There's work to be done on this, but you need to at least see what the options are. Option B, grade 4, 5, and 6 at CES. The only way this is possible is to spill into the big gym space. We didn't occupy the big gym space at CES. Option A, option B, option C, option D, option E, all involve using the big gym space at the elementary school. So right now it is spillover space if we can do PE indoors. There's opportunity for that to occur, but we have to balance, do we want to get kids in school for more in-person instruction? Something has to give, no matter what. We spill into any space, there's give and take on any of this. So in order for 4, 5, and 6 to go, once you remove any grade level and place larger cohorts on either half of the gym space, it opens up classroom space. Because people have said, well, how come all of a sudden now we can consider doing this? You told me we couldn't do it, to start school. And I'm going to go back to, we did everything we said we would do. We kept cohorts small. We allowed our teachers to come back and build a level of comfort. We allowed us to build routines and level of comfort with operation. And now we are, 8 weeks into the school year and feel like we can tackle this and do it safely, although it presents new questions and challenges. So 4, 5, and 6, yes, we could fit all of them there. I can show you a schematic of what that might potentially look like in the building. But I will tell you, if we do that, we are jammed for every little bit of space in that building. And my real fear is when we put out a survey, because if you remember, our optional remote only students, the first 20 weeks of school, we sending out a survey. Would you like to come back for in-person instruction or continue with full optional remote? Okay, that wasn't a year-long commitment. We said 20 weeks and then we'll survey. So we're getting close to the mark where we need to survey for January. If kids are going to come back, we need to know and start planning for kids coming back. Making this change might push more families to want to go to the full remote option now that they know a little bit more about the full remote option. We could see it work both ways, but 4, 5, and 6 does not leave us an ounce of room for kids coming back in. We get new students that come in. We're really kind of at capacity in that building. We're jammed in each of the rooms. So then we talked about some different options. And so, our 6th graders, you say, why does all this stuff have to keep happening to 6th grade? Why are they the ones that are impacted? Well, when you look at our plan, and our plan calls for providing in-person instruction, starting with your earliest learners and working your way up. And so that is why we ended up with K3 in person. And now we have considered, okay, let's do 4 and 5 at the elementary school, keep grade 6 as a hybrid model, and do synchronous instruction. Now we get into telling the teachers, you got to flip on your camera in 6th grade every day, and you're interacting with your in-person and your synchronous kids. And there's a reason why we haven't done that, because we know our colleagues in other school districts, it's not a great experience. It's very hard for teachers to manage both groups of kids. And again, we're asking 6th graders really to tune in for a lecture. It's what we're asking them to do while they're sitting at home by themselves. And so, but that's an option that was considered. And when you look at that consideration chart, there's pros and cons. There are benefits to doing that. But there are also a great deal of concerns in doing that. And then we talked about middle school. So let's bring 6th grade to the middle school rooms. And I've gotten this question from a ton of folks on bring in a grade level to the middle school. And there's some real concern in terms of doing that. And I want to make sure everybody knows, and again, I'll throw some schematics up here so you can see what that looks like momentarily, but right now, the space that's available in the middle school, a lot of it is available because Scotty is not running Castleton Kids. Childcare came up as a concern for parents on the survey. We bring back more in-person school. My sense is, I've talked to Scotty, he's going to put out another survey to parents, do you need after-school care? So if we move kids up there, Scotty no longer has space. We would be occupying the space that Scotty would be operating his program. That's one. Two, it sits right in the middle of our Questar wing. So Questar kind of operates out of, let me share my screen with you here. Hold on a second. It'll be easier for you to see this. So the yellow spaces you see on the map are Questar 3 spaces. So they rent and occupy all of those rooms. I'm going to just go back to something I told you here a moment ago. Questar 3 we are thrilled to have Questar 3 as partners. We love having them here. Our only 2 COVID cases have come from teachers in this part of the building. I need to remind everybody, because I've heard, don't we pay taxes to keep that building open? That's our building. What are we doing with these kids? This is our building. We need it. Well, we earn about $350,000 in revenue a year for Story Place and Questar 3. And so what our taxpayers need to understand is that offsets the need for us to tax more, because we have $350,000 of revenue that comes in that supports our budget. So that $350,000 in revenue disappears. We're cutting $350,000 worth of stuff to make up for it in the budget. So not to mention we have legal contracts with all these folks, and they're kids and their programs. These kids need school too, and we've committed to that. We're not going to go back on our word. That's not what we do. So when you look at those empty spaces at the top of this graphic, those are 2 empty rooms. That used to be we made it into a gross motor space for Story Place. They wanted that to be relocated due to COVID. They didn't want to walk through the Questar wing for their kids to go into a gross motor space. So that room has kind of opened up. And then the 3 green rooms you see next to them is where Scotty would be for Castleton Kids. Those would be 3 of Scotty's rooms. We have all sorts of issues currently with shared space, with Questar, and with Story Place. They use the gym. They have PE programs. They have all sorts of regulations they have to follow. We have an issue now with those 2 folks using shared space and working through challenges that they have in their schedules to meet their requirements that they have. They do use the cafeteria as spillover PE space. They use it for music. There's programs that run out of there. So could we take it over? Yep, we probably could. We could take over some of that space. But the classroom space that is available and sitting there at the middle school, technology has all been removed. There's no wireless access points in there. We did an upgrade when we knew we were vacating that building. There are certain upgrades we did not do in that portion of the building. Questar 3 has come in. They're operational, but they have run all their own cabling. They're on their own system. They have installed all of that stuff for their teachers to wear or to use. We have, in a portion of the building, maintained some. We've got district office that runs, but classroom space, it is vacant of anything. There is zero technology. Jim has significant concerns with putting kids over there. And not to mention, we would take 1 grade level of kids, potentially place them in these spaces, and now they are no longer part of the Skodak Central learning environment. There's no colleagues to plan with. Transportation now has to try to figure out how to drop off between Story Place and Questar. And if you've driven by on any drop off or pickup day, there's buses because kids come from all over the place to come to Story Place and to come to Questar. There's no main office. There's no building principal. I would be your principal, and I'm okay with doing that. But, you know, it doesn't run like a building. There's no nursing support. I could go on and on with the middle school. So, yes, there is room there. There is space there. But I got to tell you, if I'm a teacher and I get planted over there in the middle of that, and Questar 3 programming, you know, those kids have some needs. And, you know, it's not a typical classroom. There's often yelling and screaming, and, you know, it's not a knock on that program. That's the population of kids you're dealing with, for kids with some significant disabilities and multiple disabilities. And, you know, that environment is challenging for a regular school to just drop the program in and say, have at it. And we've got to be mindful of that. So, you know, it's not overly ideal in the middle school setting. And there are lots of reasons for that, but we considered it and we vetted it because we knew people would ask. And all of you should know the answers to that. So when people ask you, you understand what the challenges are with that middle school space. And if Scotty wants to come back and provide childcare because we're able to bring back in person for 4, 5, and 6, then we want him to have the ability to at least provide some of that in the space. Do I think he can do a 100-kid program like he used to do? Probably not, but he could probably provide some support to some of our families. Any questions on the middle school space before I knock this graphic out? I'll go back to my other screen. And then, you know, last but not least, option E, when we talked about option E, you know, we said, well, how about if we did grades 4 and 5 in person, kept a hybrid model for 6th grade, but we hire a teacher who then just provides remote instruction on remote days to engage kids. Because our teachers, that's a challenge. Our teachers have kids in front of them. And when you look at option C and option E, option C is I flip the camera on, teachers are teaching to both groups of kids. Option E, our in-class, in-person teachers would teach to kids in person. And then you have a completely different teacher that would be teaching all the hybrid kids on that day. And, you know, as you go through and you take a look at that model, again, that's kind of an out-of-the-box way of thinking a little bit about engaging kids a little bit more. But when you look at that model, you know, there are some things to really be concerned about. I've already mentioned time is a real challenge. And if, you know, I miss Hirschoff teaching math and I have a remote teacher, they have to be pretty much in sync every day because those kids are coming back and getting Miss Hirschoff for in-person math, and then, you know, a remote teacher the next day for remote instruction. And so it would be a lot of planning and collaboration and coordination, and then you've got consistency with grading and dealing with parents, and you know, there's a host of challenges with that. Not overly ideal. But again, an option when we look at particular options. So let me stop for a minute and ask for your questions or concerns or thoughts on any of these. I know I didn't dive into them in thorough detail, but you have that pros and cons chart there. Thoughts? There's no board discussion tonight. It's a workshop. Right?
So it's on the agenda, but I mean, this is the topic. So this is the discussion. There is after this is over.
And does anyone have a topic, or should I go ahead? I see Mr. Chersky hasn't unmuted. If you going to talk, Mike?
Thanks. You're like my Mike Heiser watch. Hold on, Mike.
All right, I'm ready. All right.
I got to turn your volume up. That's all.
Okay. All right. Here's a couple of factors. Just in general, looking at this, one of the things we've been looking at is whether once the semester began, how did things go? I think everyone across the state, maybe the country, and I think in our district, everyone was holding their breath about reopening school and where were we going to be in a week, 2, a month. And I know some people were making bets about, hey, by October 1, it's not going to be good. But we've made it this far, and we've done really well in our district and in many districts. So I guess, bringing the kids back fits in with that. It seems like it can be done safely, and that's something we can look at. It would seem like, there are factors to be included in terms of when we want to do this, because there's a couple just off the top of my head. It is a change during the semester, whatever that means instructionally and administratively. It will change the density in the building, in whatever buildings there are. And again, we feel like we can probably handle that, or at least the track record is good so far. We'll say that. How do we take account of the factor, in what way should we as a board take into account the fact that as a nation, we hit over 100,000 new cases of this COVID today? Are we going into a particularly stressful time? I did hear some of the, I know some schools delayed opening a couple of weeks just to see how things would go. And I know some very experienced superintendents were saying, if they could do it, they'd wait until October 1 just to see how things go. Is that a factor that we want to think about heading into the colder time when everyone's going to be inside, a perhaps more dangerous time for this COVID? Do we want to hold off and see how things go and maybe make the change not imminently? And I don't know what your time frame is, but do we want to see how things go and maybe shoot for a semester break, which would give us the insight into what's going to happen with our other remote students? So those are just a couple factors I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Mike Charsky.
Okay. Mike stole some of my thunder. I appreciate, Jason, that you want to do the best for your students. I totally agree that we want to bring them all into school. I think that some of the things that Mike brought up, and I want you to consider some of the extraneous factors that you've got facing you at this time. One of the things you did fantastically during the summer, you spent 6 to 8 weeks and you delivered one hell of an opening week. I mean, almost flawless, okay? And man, I stand up and I'll give you kudos for that. You've got some things that you really need to consider in these next 2 months. And I'm going to be careful on this one. You have an admin resource challenge, okay? And to add additional responsibilities on someone who is doing a bang-up job, but although that person can extend themselves, those people can extend themselves, I think you want to consider the fact that you have an admin resource challenge that's going to happen over the holidays. I think the second thing you want to consider is it is the holidays, and that you need time to prepare whichever option you go to comfortably, correctly. You're going to have an expense. What's the best, Brian, return on investment for bringing the students in? Okay, is it worth buying equipment and the gym or this room? Is it worth buying a teacher? Is it worth a permanent aid? Not looking at that short term, but looking at that long term based on our budget requirement. Mike Heiser nailed it. But there's travel restrictions. I've been looking at the stats too. COVID's coming up from the southern tier. COVID's coming up from the south. Do we really want to increase the chances? Not that we're doing a great job, but there is an increased chance because we're going to have more exposure in the next couple of months. I think, in my opinion, doing this over the winter break and setting this up for a new semester puts yourself in the same position that you put yourself in September. That gives you that 6 to 8 weeks. You take care of your resource challenge and the admin side. You really prepare yourself and communicate to the parents the right plan. And I think if you just pump the brakes a bit, I think you'll be more successful and you'll achieve your goal with the same efficiency that you achieved it in September.
Dan?
So I just want to first say thanks again, Jay, because there's clearly a lot of work going on here. And I disagree a little bit with some of my colleagues here, I don't think we should pump the brakes. I think we should hit the accelerator. Each day that these kids go by with only being in school 2 days a week is just not healthy. I think we're seeing it's not healthy. And if it costs us a little bit more money, I think it is in the short term. I don't think this is a 2-3 year commitment. We're looking at maybe the next 6 months to 9 months to get through. And if it costs us some money, I say let's utilize it. We need to get these kids back in school yesterday. And I understand what's going on nationally with the uptick in COVID cases. And I just don't think that should drive us away from getting these kids in school at all. So, and the suggestion that we should wait to give you more time, Jay, would almost suggest that you haven't been thinking about this. I think you've been thinking about this. You've been working on this. I don't think we're going to skip a beat as soon as you pull this and move forward.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate the comments as well. Any other comments from Mary? I just unmuted. You're good. Oop, sorry.
Okay. First off, I would agree with Jason that option D is probably the most risky thing you could do. And you have to balance the risk. And I think the risk in that building outweighs, because now you're mixing in the rest of the students, those students that you would put there with all the other students that we don't have control over. So that's one thing. I almost side or suggest that looking at the thought of waiting until the beginning of the semester might not be a bad idea, in the sense that, families are going to be intermixing with holidays. I don't even know what I'm going to do with my holidays. And therefore you're introducing extra risk with those challenges that those folks might introduce into the population. And at least if you wait until the semester break, you will have gotten by the Christmas holidays and that 2 weeks or more into that. Now, spread happens no matter what, but at least you will have seen whether that has had any effect. On the other hand, I could also agree with Dan. So, you know, no matter what we do, we just have to be cautious and just weigh the risk of all of it.
Hi, Mike. I have a comment. Can you hear me?
I can hear.
Thanks, Mike Heisner. Can anyone else hear me? I don't know if they can hear us in the room. It sounds like they're talking, or it looks like they're talking. Mike Tuttle?
Hey, Mike Tuttle. Mr. Tuttle. Mr. Tuttle.
You know, I worry about our community and our families in our community making decisions to travel. But to some degree, you know, if we what ifed everything, we were one of the schools that wanted to open at the beginning when we had some of our neighboring districts that said we want to go remote for the first couple of weeks, see how it goes, do some additional training, kind of ease back into this. And we couldn't wait to get our kids back. And so, you know, I understand the reservation and caution. I got to tell you, this stuff weighs on me every day. Every day it weighs on me, and there's no right answer. I can tell you all that right now. There's just no right answer. And so, you know, yes, we could continue to be cautious as we move into flu season and travel. I inherently have to think people need to do the right thing. If I'm a family traveling, when I come back, I'm quarantining. I'm not going to lie and send my kid into school. If you do the right thing and you follow the directions, that's what's going to keep the public safe. That's what's going to keep our kids safe. That's what's going to keep our schools open. There is a very reality to Mike's point. I don't know how many folks, you know, faculty and staff wise, I get 4 bus drivers that need to be quarantined. I can't get kids to school anyway. I don't know that. And so I can't control individuals, but we are in the kid business. And so, you know, we have chosen to be in the kid business. And I would think when our community and our kids need us, we make sacrifices. I am personally making sacrifices. I know that. I don't put myself on a pedestal, but I would love to see my family too. I'm not seeing my family. It's not the right time for me to do that. So it's hard. You know, and it's a challenge. You know, and I keep going back, and I'll tell all of you, I keep going back to trying to do what is in the best interest of kids. What is in the best interest of our kids? And I go back to board meeting after board meeting, sitting and listening as that being the mantra. And, you know, it's yes, I agree. We need to do it cautiously. I would love to do it tomorrow. I can't do it tomorrow. We're going to need to be thoughtful and take some time. And Thanksgiving is approaching, you know, and I know there's a sense of urgency. To Dan's point, you know, there is some folks out there that truly believe every day my kid's on hybrid, it's a lost experience for my kid. It doesn't mean they're correct in that line of thinking. I think there are still good experiences happening for those kids on those days. But I can almost guarantee you being in front of a teacher every day is going to be a better experience than that kid sitting in their living room on a computer doing remote instruction. I don't think any of us could argue that. So I sit here as your educational leader saying, how do we do this safely and how do we get them in the building? And, you know, we've got internal stuff we got to deal with, because there are people that don't want to teach in a gym. I would tell you that right now. There are people that don't want to teach in this room because the sun doesn't shine into this room. You know, and that's a reality. Like, you know, am I okay working in a place where the sun doesn't shine into the room? I would not ever put anybody in that spot full time, but we're in a pandemic. And so I'm saying, what's the better of two options here? Is it better to get these kids back in front of you in a space that is less than ideal? We'll work our tail off to try to make it appropriate for you. You know, or do they stay home and have a remote experience, which is, it's not a bad remote experience, but I don't think anybody can convince me that the remote experience is going to be better than an in-person 5-day a week. And so I'm balancing, you guys. I don't know the answer to this one, and it's hard. And so, you know, I feel my job is to encourage you and remind you that we are in the kid business, to get these kids in and to give them the instruction and to put them in front of our outstanding teachers. Seems to me like that is where we usually fall. And so I would hurry up and do it. You know, I hear people, you know, I hear the stuff. Well, you got a few parents arguing, so you're just caving because parents are arguing. It's not true. I'm okay telling parents no. We had an issue last year where we talked over and over again, and we didn't agree on class size for 4th grade. You remember that? I would love that problem to be back and this one to be gone away. But, you know, well, yeah, you know, and I don't take any of that stuff lightly, but sometimes, you know, you know, you ask me to work with the team to make decisions. And I'm going to tell you, it is going to be hard on our faculty and staff. I will acknowledge that. And I've already said it once, I'll say it again. If we make any changes, we bear the burden as the adults to relieve the burden from kids and parents. That's the way, that's my mindset. That's what I'm thinking. That's our responsibility to do that. And I will tell you, our faculty and staff have been dynamite. You know, and change is not easy. We're changing a lot and quickly. To Mike's point, you know, and here's another thing I don't have. I don't have all day, all summer long to sit and plan. School's open. I'm working. I got other stuff going on, and so do the principals, and so do the teachers. And so, you know, our ability to, you know, sprint to the finish line in the summer, we would spend, you know, the first 4 or 5 hours of our day together in the library, and then all break off and kind of go do parts to get our job done and complete that reopening plan. I've been very real and very open and very transparent. I don't have any stake in the game here, and I don't know what the right answer is, but I care desperately about the experiences that our kids have. I care desperately about the experience that our employees have, our faculty and staff. I care about how they feel when they come to work, and I want them to be safe. I wouldn't put somebody in this space if there wasn't a pandemic going on and it made the difference between improving an educational experience for a child or not. And I have to go back on, we're in the kid business to do that. It's not ideal. I don't want to do that, you know, I don't think the space is terrible. But, you know, it's not ideal. It's not a classroom. Now, how do I turn this into a classroom environment for kids? You know, there's no easy answer. I think you're all right. To some degree, everybody is right. Every point you've made is right, which is the burden I've been dealing with since March. There's really no right answer.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in there because I think Sherry's got a comment she'd like to make, so I want to get her on. Go ahead, Sherry.
Can you hear me? So I think one thing that the school district did really well when you know, come this beginning of the year, and Jason, I think you mentioned it earlier, is that we put really good safety processes and procedures in place. You know, our cohorts are kept very separate, you know, even more so than many other districts. I think that we've done a lot in terms of ensuring that we have that safe environment for our kids, knowing that there is a pandemic going on and the numbers outside of our area or even inside our area could be going up. I think that with that in place, we need to trust that and get these kids back. I think, you know, we talked a little bit about the holidays coming up. The same kids that we're going to bring back 5 days a week are there 2 days a week. So it's really an incremental risk in having additional kids there with the holidays. Those kids are already back on site. I think we just have to trust the safety processes and practices that are put in place to keep all of our kids safe. And to everyone's point tonight, you know, really get them back in the classroom, as that's where they're going to learn more content than they are currently at home. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Sherry. I'm gonna go with Shelley.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Just a couple of things. I do think it's important to understand what the cost of each of those options would be before we make a decision. I do think it's important that we get the kids back. As a parent, I can tell you it's not the same. And you know, some of these K through 6 kids, you might have one child in school 5 days a week already. So that household is already being exposed. So to have one more child come in, that pool is already contaminated. So Thanksgiving comes and the first graders goes to Thanksgiving dinner and your fourth grader goes to Thanksgiving dinner. That first grader is already coming into school, right? I mean, you're not going to, or you will. You have to trust, like you mentioned, Jason, trust in the system. We've set these procedures and processes in place, and we've asked our families and our community to follow the guidelines. If you're going to travel, quarantine. You know, you get a runny nose, you call your pediatrician and you're going in for a COVID test and you're waiting. It's just the way it is. You're not sending your kid back to school with a runny nose, and we're hoping that everyone's following those same protocols. We've asked them to, and hopefully they are. So I think we need to find a way to get the kids back as soon as we can, as safely as we can, and as fiscally responsible as we can. It is not the same. Having 2 fifth graders, the days that they're home, Wednesdays are not bad, but Tuesdays and Fridays, it's not good. It's really not good. So I'd like to see them not lose a half of their school year, but we can find the right choice here. I think we need to do it as soon as possible.
Thank you, Shelley. Any other comments from the board? Mike?
Yes, sir.
And I heard what you said. I heard that comment a few years back. So I caution you. And I want you to really take good care of yourself, because, you know, I know that if I work on something and I work till midnight, sometimes my decision making isn't what it should be. But I also know, as we've experienced in this district, the challenges that you are facing and the stress that you are facing. I think you know where I'm going. So I'm just worried about you too.
I appreciate that.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Mike. Chuck?
I guess, Jason, the question is, what do you consider a realistic time frame for how soon you could put together, once you get direction on a model, what time frame would you need to implement bringing the kids back?
I think that's a very fair question. I think one of the things we have to be strategic about is we recognize that anytime we move classrooms and create space, like the room you're in now, all this stuff has to come out. We've got to, you're talking about weekend time with facilities. When we talk about costs and things like that, we're going to have to bring folks in after hours. I think we're going to have to look strategically on if we do make any change, it would have to be surrounding some kind of break or, it just, in order to make it happen, teachers are going to need time, to set up and relocate and do some of those things. Initially I would have loved to have told you, the start of the second marking period, which is, 2 weeks away. There's no way realistically we can do that in 2 weeks. And you have to remember all the things like, if sixth grade were to come, we owe it to parents to talk with parents a little bit about what that looks like. We've got to do forums. We've got to reroute transportation and do new bus runs. I mean, logistically, it's massive in terms of its scope. So, when you look at where we are, I would hate to give you a deadline, but just, knowing some of those things, it's going to really take us some coordinated effort to get spaces set up appropriately to make them ready to go for kids to even make that transition and get there. And it's not for lack of effort, but kids are coming in every day. So they got to come into a space and be in a space. And then when we're ready to kind of flip that switch, they got to be ready to come into another space. So if we can get one kind of quasi set up and then take one down, that's something we potentially could do. But there are things we could do to get ready, but it's not easy on top of everybody else's, we work it during the day too. So facilities can't move during the day, teachers can't prep and prepare during the day, and we can only do that off hours. So it's going to take a coordinated effort with Matt and facilities team to really kind of plan that out. But, as you heard tonight, even from some of our members, there's a sense of urgency to some degree. There's a sense of caution in others. And so, we'll try to balance that with what's realistic. I can't sit here tonight and tell you, well, we can do it by this. It depends on the model we go with and what we end up doing and where folks are going to go as to how intense that is going to be. So I understand the urgency, but at the same time, there's some reality with all of this stuff too. I can't just make it happen overnight. It's going to take a little bit of time.
Well, I guess then for clarification for our point, we're discussing this tonight. Our next board meeting is the 19th. When would you be looking for guidance from us on what model you think again, we're going to defer to you probably on some of this. You're going to look for guidance from us, but what's the date that the 19th that we're talking about probably making the decision?
I would say for sure you'll have a decision by then. And I would even tell you, out of the 4 models that you're looking at, option A is probably the best, probably most cost-effective option for us out of all those options. And it impacts, we're able to get 4, 5, and 6 in person. We're able to do it in larger spaces. I think doing the analysis was helpful to me and to the team, I think, to go through that analysis. But I think at the end of the day, option A, bringing that 6th grade up here, it makes a lot of sense in terms of not jamming space down at the elementary school. We can fit it in transportation-wise. There's food service. They're in an educational environment. They can follow a schedule. There's, but there's a lot of logistics behind that. And I think there's a lot of concern that would need to be addressed with parents.
Looking, and again, just brainstorming, are you looking to do it all if we went with option A, would you want it to be 4, 5, 6 start coming in all the same time? Or to your point about having limited resources already with manpower to make these moves, if we made the decision to go with something, is it all right, we get this space set up, can pull 6 out, then work on making space for either 4 or 5, and then so 6 comes back, 5, 4, or 4 then 5, or some variety thereof is what you're kind of thinking?
I would think a phased approach, it makes the most sense. I don't know that we can, unless you really look to, put the team to work over the holiday break in December and really brought everybody back after December, January 1st or 2nd, 3rd, whatever our return date is. But it's either you do it after the holiday break because you have the resources and the time to make all those moves and do that. But the reality coming off of a holiday break is, are we asking faculty and staff to come in over holiday break when they typically don't work to get the room set up and ready to go so we can move? But it's not as easy as that, again. So I think a phased approach is probably the most realistic, and slowly start to phase in. And I need to sit with Matt and kind of go through what that would look like. We weren't quite there for this meeting tonight, but phased approach is probably the best approach.
And so then maybe this is a little further out thinking still, but we have the entire remote learners that don't come in at all. And second semester, some of them might opt to come back in. Do you foresee having the space to accommodate that, and B, faculty to do such if I mean, what's the break even at that point? It's about if you have half the remote learners decide to come back, can you still afford to offer the remote as an option, or is there going to have to be discussions about what we do there if we have people that are really looking, you know, if you're going to have 3 kids that decide to stay remote and the rest of the families have decided that they're going to try, what's the options there?
Yeah, well, and
Not-
I will tell you truthfully, and again, I don't know until we kind of get that data and we survey those folks. But from the initial survey, it seems like the optional remote families seem to be very satisfied with what's happening. You know, there are, some blips at the secondary level, but it's a very different program. The elementary folks in general, and I think those folks that went optional remote for a reason. And when all the things we've talked about with travel and upticks in COVID, if they've got compromised immune systems at home, or there's going to be decisions that are made to just stay cautious and do what they're doing. And if they were having a poor experience, I would think that they would probably want to opt back in. And some may, but I don't think it's going to be an influx of like 20 of them. I just don't think that that's going to happen, because I think if they weren't having a real good experience, we probably would have heard about that. There are things we need to continue to work on with, to improve it and make it better. But I think they're having a pretty good experience, but we might get some. And if we move 6th grade here, it provides us the most flexibility to be able to accommodate with folks coming back, for sure. And we have to also recognize we could end up with people moving into the district. We've got to be able to accommodate those. The 4, 5, 6 option at CES left us very little option to do that, because we can only put so many kids in a room. But, look at what you're doing for 6th grade. And we talk about class size. If we had 23 or 24 kids in this space, there is a lot of space to add 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more kids if you had to. Now, we're getting back into the class size issue during COVID. We don't really want to do that. But if we had to, we could accommodate in much larger spaces. And so there's some benefit to using the big gym for grade levels as well. That just, you have the option of, having those larger cohorts in there and having more flexibility in terms of kids that are coming in. So, it's certainly, you have options that way.
Good, Chuck. Okay, thanks. I just want to throw out to everybody before I get to you, Dan, that these options are there, and it's not a vote on our part. Just so we're all clear, we're not going to vote for an option. That's Jason's job, not ours. But as Shelley mentioned, we are, there is a fiscal component of it, of what that's going to cost, and that's something we should be aware of as we go into it. And as you just mentioned, Jason, that A seems to be probably the most fiscally sound, and that's important, I think, for the board to know. So just obviously before the decision's made, letting us know what that is. I think is all we can ask for, and we follow in the the protocols that we set up.
Can I just share?
None of them will be cheap.
They
They all come with an expense.
Yes.
All of them.
Understood. Yes, Dan.
I would say expense, 200 kids impacted by this, right? 2 to 3 grades, give or take a few.
Yeah, you roughly 70 students in a grade, so 200 students, that's
I
about
don't
right.
know what we're talking about in expenses, but I think we should be prepared to spend $100,000 to get us through this 6-month period. Maybe a little bit more, whatever it takes to get these kids back to school. Now, pardon me? We have the money, what would be considered in our reserve fund now. It may hit us in the back end. Well, we're not looking at an expense that's going to continue after 6 to 9 months. We're looking to get through this issue, right? I assume.
I hope.
Yes, to a degree. To Mike's point, he is saying that whatever we do, we lose. We don't get back. And Right.
whatever we don't do,
And we
200
know,
kids are impacted.
I know, understood, Dan, understood. I mean, that's the decision we have to make, and, you know, also understanding where we're headed, which I know you know, because we just got that briefing last month.
Aware of the financial implications, but at the same time, we have over 200 kids impacted 3 days a week.
Sure.
I think that needs to be addressed.
Yes. I think all we're saying is that we just need to be fiscally prudent with it.
Absolutely. With that said, I understand the phased-in approach for sixth grade because we actually have to move them. But I would like to move fourth and fifth. I mean, we're not asking to move them. We're just saying go down to CS full time. We're not asking teachers to move to another building. We're not asking about bus routes to move, change. So I get the time frame around sixth grade might take a little bit. Maybe we could do a little bit more with them when the extra teacher is set for that time frame. But yeah, I'm looking at, you said it wouldn't be ready at least in a couple of weeks. Is after Thanksgiving break at least.
You're not going to get me to bite on a hard deadline. I can't give you one right now. But what I will tell you is part of it is the only way space is freed up is to empty rooms into, let's say, the big gym, right? So if somebody's going to make a move, if we're going to move fourth grade, they occupy rooms down there right now. We would need to move, let's say, get them set up in the big gym, let's say, and it opens up classrooms to then be able to plan for fifth grade. And they might need to move rooms and change rooms based on rooms opening up. That's the only way. When folks say, how come we can do this now? Because if we occupy the big space, it opens up rooms when you occupy the large space. So maybe not everybody will move in 4, 5, and 6. We're going to try to be as least disruptive as we can, but without fail, there's definitely going to be some movement. They might not move buildings, but my classroom, it goes from being in room 206 to now being in the big gym, and I got to get all my stuff and I got to get all set up and ready to go in the big gym, and and then somebody else is going to fill in that space to do something else. Pretty much is how that's going to work. So there is some logistical movement on the inside, and we got to be mindful, like, who does that? Right? And when is the teacher going to do that? And is the custodians doing that? Are the teachers doing that? It's kind of gone hand in hand, but it's a logistical problem.
I appreciate you not biting on the hard date.
Yeah, and again, I can't stress enough. I've heard tonight be cautious, and I've heard urgent. So, I don't, we've been over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, been going like maniacs on this stuff, trying to put all this data together and work with individuals and get feedback, and everybody's got great ideas. But at some point, we've got to make some decisions and start the planning process to move forward for everybody's sake. Otherwise, everybody's just going to be nervous about it all the time. I do appreciate, I have a lot of faith in our safety protocols and the procedures we put in place. And again, those kids are in school every other day, and they're working with our educators every other day. So the risk to our teachers about having a larger cohort is really minimal because they're seeing those kids every other day. There's more of a risk to those kids that are being introduced in cohorts. And to be honest, there's probably a lot of them that are playing together outside of school and doing those things anyway. I don't know that for sure, but you go down to CES, there's village kids kind of, hanging out and playing hoop and doing other things. And so, we'll do it if we can do it safely. And I owe it to our teachers and all of you and to our kids to do it the right way. No, we're thinking, and we're gonna, come up with a plan and communicate it to everybody, but we'll get moving on it.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Is there anything else for Jason? I mean, ultimately, we all have our ideas and stuff, but I better stop there. Mary, did you have something?
I just close with one thing. You're welcome.
Yes, you may have the last.
I love the discussion. It's beneficial to all of us. I just want to point out the slide you see here. I'm not going to play this for time's sake, but I would ask, please, especially our board members, any members of our public, there's a link in the last slide in the slide deck. Brian Radowitz, our communication specialist, interviewed teachers teaching in different instructional models and interviewed some students. It's really worthwhile for you to go in and see. The teachers are talking about some of the challenges and kids are talking about what their experience is like, but instead of me telling you about it, it's good to hear it from them. So please take the time to go through and watch that. And I would encourage any members of our public, we'll get it up on the website too, so folks have access to it. But I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Does that finish your presentation now?
It does, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, before I open up into public comment, I just want to open the floor one more time. Are we good? Looks like we're good here. Go check my videos. I think we're good on the videos as well. All right, so at this time, we're gonna go ahead and move into public comment. Get my list up here. So for those who are joined into WebEx, you can put your hand up. For those that are on the phone, I believe it's star 3. Put your hand up so I can see. Yep, we got one at the top. So I'm going to go here. Okay, so Nicole, you are unmuted. You may go ahead.
All right, thank you. Before I start, I just want to again say thank you to everyone, to the board, administration, the teachers, support staff, transportation, really everyone in the district that's really been doing, I know, the best that they can in these crazy, extraordinary times. And I just wanted to put a request in before I kind of talk about the reopening thing. If whomever could post the audio for all the meetings, I have looked back on the board meetings page and I saw the last one was July. And so there are some meetings that it's like on the Board of Education, like the main page. So if there's an opportunity to post some of the ones since then, that would be great because I'd miss some. On the subject of what's being discussed today, just regarding the survey, I just wanted to echo something that Shelley had said. I think it's really important to pull apart the data by the building because big decisions, are being made for only one building based in part on this data. And that data is not really representative of solely like grades 4 and 6. And I know from being in elementary that's, it's a bit skewed, I think. I can tell you that I share Mr. Chevier's concerns, and I think others do as well, regarding how the hybrid model is going. My 2 fifth graders spend rarely more than 2 hours on the non-Wednesday remote days. Today it was only an hour and 15 minutes. And that included them doing about a half hour of independent reading. So something's missing here, and I can't help but worry that they're falling behind for where they need to be. And I've spoken with administration on this. I don't want you to think that, I'm just coming to the board meeting and saying something. I've definitely had multiple conversations about this. I just unfortunately haven't seen any noticeable change. So like with the survey, I'm hoping when that data when it gets separated, I know Mr. Chevier, you said you were going to do that. If that could be made available to the public, that I think would be helpful. So, I also, like I said, I have those concerns with the hybrid model. I just want to express my concern also though, like with the timing of this, because, the cases are going up, hospitalizations are going up, deaths are going up statewide and regionally. Just today, there were 43 new cases in Albany County with the highest number of hospitalizations since May. There were 14 new cases in Rensselaer County. And we're seeing some more show up in school districts. And, we've been we've been really blessed that we haven't had any cases yet, but I feel like we're on borrowed time here. So, it's concerning, and, we're about to get into flu season, and, I know that's already been brought up, but I just kind of wanted to reiterate that. We've already been in a position where, someone in my household had to get tested and my kids had to be held out for 4 days, which, I think that kind of just brings up a point of bringing like grade 4 through 6 in 5 days a week. In that situation, my kids would have missed 4 days of instruction and had to make that up versus the 1 day in person. So that would have been a lot harder to do. And I just wanted to kind of bring up this issue because, like I said, so we get into flu season, we have more people having symptoms. You're going to have a lot of kids who are out for multiple days. So that is going to create a burden, I know, on the teachers as far as how to try to keep catching up those kids, and how many kids they're losing, and maybe the teacher won't be there, and maybe the subs won't be there, et cetera. And I know you all know that. So my one main question is basically, so, this is going to potentially go into effect, at some time in time to be determined in the future. But so in the meantime, though, we have kids who are in the hybrid model and we know it's not working well. So my question is, has there been any discussion about how to improve it at the very least in the interim? Because otherwise, if we're talking about potentially going into keeping them like this through, after, say, the winter break, potentially, we still have a ways to go for that. And so, I'm just concerned about that lost instructional time too. So, is there any talk of like recording the lessons? Some of the things that came up in some of the options like that, you would have to record lessons, stream them into another room if, depending on one of the options. Has there been talk of doing that and just, giving some other options, at least in the interim, to get them through before this happens? And that's really, I'd say that's my main kind of question. I honestly don't know where I stand on this right now. I just know that I didn't plan on them being there 5 days a week. And I was part of the many committee meetings that basically said in no uncertain terms that this wasn't going to happen. So I felt very caught off guard when it was suddenly kind of thrown out there. They're like, oh, hey, now we can make it all work. Because I sat through many a meeting of being told basically this couldn't work. So, it's just kind of throwing us for a loop. I'm not really taking a side per se. And I know, what's good for one person may not be good for another, et cetera. But I just kind of wanted to at least just kind of voice my concerns and my thoughts just to kind of throw into the pile of thinking, I guess you could say. But that's it. And again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your giving us the opportunity to give feedback and all that you're doing.
Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate your comments.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? I don't see anybody else. Oh, I see one here. Hold on. Okay, Kendra, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kendra Severance, and I am a parent of a fourth grader in the hybrid model. And I did want to speak this evening because as a concerned parent, I'm not worried about the safety with the protocols in place. As Mr. Chevier described this evening, I'm more concerned about what's happening with the hybrid kids. Every day that goes by, they fall further behind academically, socially, emotionally, and mentally. And I think that parents understand the risk of sending their kids to school right now. And I think that what's happening with the kids and the damage of the isolation of them being at home and alone and not getting the education and not seeing their friends and not understanding what's happening is worse. And each day that goes by, it's affecting them deeply. And so I would argue that the proposed model tonight is what should have been implemented from the start. And so I don't think we should pump the brakes on a well thought out plan. I would say get fourth and fifth back into the school as soon as possible and give Skodak back its reputation it's always had. And let's set the bar as a district on how important it is to educate our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you see anybody, Jason? I don't see any of the hands. I don't see anything in the chat. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment section at this time. Are there Any other comments, concerns at this point? Go ahead, Dan.
So say a young kid does come under the circumstance where they have to quarantine or stay home for 4 days or maybe. Oh, gotcha. The circumstance where a young student may have to stay home for 4 days or maybe 2 weeks. What processes do we have in place to make sure that they're not falling behind? I didn't even think of that. Is it the same teacher that has to catch up with them as well?
Under the quarantine.
Hold on,
Protocols, that's
Jason, your mic was off. So unfortunately, could you repeat Dan's question and then say that again, please? Sorry.
yeah. You sure my mic was off? It looks like it's on. So Dan, your question was, what do you do for a student who is at home for quarantine, and how do they get the work while they're on quarantine, and how is that handled? So typically, our classroom teachers are responsible for providing work to those students. So, in addition to the work that they typically would do if they have a student or 2 or 3 that are on quarantine, they're typically working with families to make sure that those kids have the work that they need to do each day. So it's a little different if a kid goes in for an operation and they're out for a medical issue. We might provide tutoring and that sort of thing. We don't have the resources on the COVID to be able to provide tutoring. So our teachers are really working with the families to do that.
So maybe we could take a look at, when you think about the resources, the cost this may end up costing us. Maybe we can include something of increasing resources around that.
Possible. Yep.
Yes, Shelley, go ahead.
But our learning management system, when it comes online, should help with that, right? Because that's going to be a place where the teacher and the parent and the student will all be able to communicate better. And it's not something our teachers aren't dealing with. You could have the flu last year and you're out of school for 5 days, and they've worked with our students in the past. So it is definitely a concern, but we had faith in them last year. I would think we could have faith in them this year. And with that resource we're going to provide, it should actually help for long-term absences, I would think.
Mary.
Isn't it almost the opposite problem though? If a student is out for 2 weeks because they have to quarantine, if they're hybrid already, they could participate on the hybrid days.
True.
I'm just saying.
Teachers have been very creative about trying to find ways to bring those kids in and keep them connected on those in-person days. So folks have leveraged technology and have worked with families and kids in that circumstance to try to make sure the experience is good for them. But truthfully, it varies depending on what model you're in and what we have the ability to do. So, it is something we'll continue to take a look at.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Anything else? Look online. Okay, so if there's no further, or actually, could I get is there a motion to move into executive session to discuss the personal history of a particular person? If it moves, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, so all those in favor of going into executive session, please say aye, and we go around the room. Mr. Peters? Aye. Mrs. Palmer?
Aye.
Wojcicki,
Aye.
Mrs. Jurista, Mr. Grandinetti, Mr. Hersey,
Aye.
Mr. Heiser.
Aye.
Oop, hold on one second. Sorry, Dan, I'm slow. All right, Mr. Heiser.
Aye.
Thank you. And Mrs. Gibson.
Aye.
Thank you. My vote is aye. So this concludes the open session. And we'll move into executive session. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'm just waiting to see it.
So we have to log off.
Yep. So all the board members can log off at this point.